Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, books, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another show. My name is Bruce Markison. As always, I'm joined by co-host and producer Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty good, Bruce. How's everything going with you tonight?
Well, very good. At the time of the taping of this, I am on the eve of heading out to Monster Bash, first time that we've gone in a few years. So looking forward to seeing some of our friends there, writers like Frank Dell'Istrito and Greg Mank, historian Dan Day. Among the scheduled celebrities, Butch Patrick, who, of course, played Eddie Munster on The Munsters back in the mid-1960s. So it should be a fun weekend.
Oh, that sounds like a blast. Oh, how much fun is that going to be?
Perhaps too much. Perhaps I'll get into trouble in some way.
Keep us updated.
We'll try to avoid that. Yeah. We'll try to stay on the straight and narrow as best we can. So that's something we're looking forward to. Now, this show that we are recording now will actually be the first show to debut during the summer season. Summer, of course, starts on June 20th. And I think that's very appropriate given what we're going to be talking about today. And this week we have a return engagement with our friend Kirk Hazen. He's a historian on the horror genre, also a musical composer, someone who is currently working on a vampire-themed movie of his own. And on this episode, Kirk is going to be talking to us about two movies that celebrate their 50th anniversaries in June of 2025. One is the all-time classic Jaws. Boy, that is the ultimate summer movie. It debuted in theaters on June 20th, 1975. And the other film is the lesser-known but still very entertaining cult classic Race with the Devil, which first hit theaters 1 week after Jaws. That was June 27th, 1975. So these two films were actually in the theaters at the same time, some 50 years ago. And Kirk's going to offer his thoughts on both of those movies. Kirk, it seems like we were just talking to you not that long ago about the wonderful new film Sinners. Today we'll do some vintage horror. Welcome back to the gallery. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me back. The last conversation was fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to this one. I love both movies, especially Jaws. I grew up with this film. And Race with the Devil is, I think, a classic as well. And as of late, I've been hanging out with my son, my youngest son, Charlie, and we've been doing zombie movies. He's obsessed with zombie films, so I've just been, as usual in my life, awash with cinema, but especially zombies lately. Because Day of the Dead is also having its 40th anniversary. It came out in 1985, in the summer of 85. So we just did that one the other night, and wow, does that hold up? It's a great movie.
Really? Yeah. That was the third, right? After Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, the one which a lot of people felt was a bit of a letdown, but I find it to be a classic, even though Dawn's my favorite. And Charlie had a blast watching it. Like I had to mute some of the swearing because it's like Tarantino-esque with its swearing. So I know the movie so well I could hit the mute button at the right moments. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun introducing him to that. He's gotten into a lot of these Korean and Japanese zombie films as well on Netflix. So it's really ignited an interest in the genre.
Yeah. You know, that's interesting. There was no cursing that I remember in Night of the Living Dead. And I'm trying to remember if there was any coarse language in Dawn of the Dead. There might have been.
A little.
But it kind of shows you how movies changed from the late 60s to the mid 80s. You know, what was accepted, the practices, what was done in terms of language. It really did change over that time period.
It sure did. Yeah. Day almost was ahead of its time with its the language, the interaction of the characters, and the dynamic with especially Sarah, the main character. Yeah. And it's very, they treat her very misogynistically, and it's intense. I think more of a 90s film in that regard, because when it came out, I thought this exceeds Scarface as far as F words easily.
Wow. Yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
All right, Kirk, let's begin with Jaws 50 years ago. Before we get to questions fired at you about this great film, let's give a brief summary of the storyline, especially for those who haven't seen it in a while. So it's set during the summer tourist season. The small seaside town of Amity, which is a mythical town, but a popular tourist location in the movie, and it suddenly becomes infiltrated by sharks, resulting in multiple attacks and multiple deaths. The local lawman, Chief Brody, reaches out for help from a scientist named Hooper, who is an expert on sea life, particularly on the habits of sharks. Brody and Hooper will butt heads with the mayor of Amity, who refuses to close the beach because of the loss of revenue that'll occur during the 4th of July holiday. And boy, that creates some memorable confrontations in the film. Eventually, after a third victim is killed by the shark, a very large shark, and Brody's son is injured in that same attack, Chief Brody convinces Mayor Vaughn to seek the assistance of a salty man of the sea named Quint. So the three men, Quint, Brody, Hooper, all with very different personalities, are forced to work together in trying to hunt down this massive shark on the open water. So, Kirk, Jaws is arguably the first true blockbuster film of the summer. It was one that resulted in enormous lines at the theaters during the early summer of 1975. It became a cultural phenomenon. I had a chance to see it after waiting online for a long time back in 75. You're a little bit younger than me. Did you have the opportunity to see Jaws in the theater during that initial run?
I so wish I did. I caught up actually with it, the ABC Sunday night movie, I think in '78. But I remember the Jaws phenomenon very, very well because I was 5 years old, and it was the first time that I ever really realized you could be devoured and eaten by another living creature. And it kind of created a little bit of existentialism in that for a 5-year-old, like, wow. And I was fascinated without having even seen it. My parents went, and I remember my grandparents babysitting me, and when my parents came back, my mom described a lot of the film to me, which immediately fascinated me to no end. You know, I was dying to see it and actually was begging to check it out. But I think at the time they thought it was a little too much for me. And I don't think it would have been, but I understand their concerns. When I caught up with it later, it was a real revelation to finally see it. But up to that point, I was watching a lot of Jacques Cousteau documentaries and things like that, and also noticing all the Jaws merchandise. And my mom did buy me a rubber shark to play with when I was a kid in the tub. There was a lot of, like, I guess, rip-off merchandise out there as well. So you went to the toy store, you'd see rubber sharks everywhere, rip-off Jaws towels. It was a real phenomenon and very memorable even before seeing the film.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I wish I had the chance to see this one at the theater too. I wasn't quite there. I was only 5 or 6 years old at the time, so I didn't get that opportunity. So I feel that one. So have you rewatched this movie recently?
Yeah, just was it this weekend? I've watched it with the kids many times, so I decided to watch the original by myself this weekend late at night, just to keep it fresh in my head. And it holds up every time. There's every moment of it, every shot pretty much is iconic.
Oh wow! Did anything in particular hit a little bit differently this time?
Well, probably I'm on my 100th viewing at least. I used to throw it on just as background, in college and things like that. Obsessed with it. The one thing that really does stand out for me, just I guess on an atmospheric level, is Bill Butler's cinematography. Like I've always loved his work, and I paid particularly close attention to what he did with this film, the day for night stuff, when they're out in the water in the third act. And I really love the atmosphere of the film. There's a lot of brightly lit, sunny, beautiful scenes, but there's also a lot of immensely dark, spooky scenes, like the Ben Gardner boat scene, the whole Indianapolis speech scene in the hall. And Bill Butler did an incredible job. And prior to that, interestingly enough, he shot Return of Count Yorga and The Death Master with Robert Quarry. Robert Quarry liked his work so much in Return of Count Yorga that he had him work on The Death Master. And both films are exceptionally great-looking movies. You could see Butler warming up in terms of what he was able to accomplish in Jaws, because I think he's sort of the secret weapon of the film and on a technical level. Verna Field's editing is amazing too, obviously Spielberg's direction, but I really, really love Butler's imagery, especially like that one iconic shot of Quint on the front of the boat, and he's lit by the sunset behind him. And there's the music, and it's that little montage scene, always just goosebumps, on my arms thinking about it right now.
Oh, wow. What about you, Bruce? How did you feel about seeing the movie again? Did anything stand out a little bit different for you?
Well, I have not seen it 100 times. I'm probably in the 40 range at this point.
Wow.
Whenever it's on cable, whenever it's on television, and I'm just, sort of scanning the channels, surfing, and it's on, I usually will watch it for at least a few minutes or maybe for the rest of the movie, depending on what else, if there's not a Yankee game on or something like a new TV show. It's one of those movies that, I feel comfortable. I know it well enough that I can kind of start watching it at any point and still feel, pretty comfortable with what's going on. It's interesting. I've heard some people, when we talk about the film now, some people say that they don't think the shark is very believable or very frightening, and I really don't agree. I think it holds up. I know they had multiple sharks and they had lots of technical problems, but I don't think that shows up in the film. I think it all comes across pretty nicely, and I think that special effect, if you will, of that mechanical shark, I think on screen it still holds up well. And you don't have any of this ridiculous CGI that we see with more recent films about sharks. And there have been so many that have been done just in the last 20 to 30 years. And of course, most of them, except maybe a movie like Deep Blue Sea, most of them don't, come anywhere close to the masterpiece that Jaws is. But I think it holds up, and I think the shark is still frightening. And I can imagine if I did watch it in the theater on a big screen, I would probably be a little bit jumpy seeing it. So yeah, it does hold up for me.
Yeah, I know. I've been reading a lot because it is like the 50th anniversary that there's going to be different premieres of this movie once again in large outdoor venues. And there will be like swimming pools and ponds, and people can watch it from, little floaty things in a lake. And I'd be like, I would be way too scared to do that. But, oh my goodness.
I love the idea of that, actually. That would be right up my alley, because I do love the water. I don't know about on the ocean, especially like off the coast of California, where a lot of white sharks are, but in a lake or a pond, like my dad has a pond, I'd love to have a big screen set up outside and just float and watch the sun go down and the movie start.
Oh my gosh. It would definitely be iconic especially for the 50th. So I was curious, what do each of you think about this film? Do you think it leans more towards horror or adventure, or do you feel that it's the perfect hybrid? Kirk?
I'm going to say that it's the perfect hybrid. It's one of the perfect audience movies in that it encompasses everything: Americana, vacation culture, family, family ties, even between the three principals in the end, workplace conflicts. It just has everything. And there's such a light on its feet humor to it with great one-liners and dialogue that it's all story driven. There's no wise ass Marvel throwaway comments, that type of stuff. Not to completely knock the Marvel movies. Sometimes they're on point, but a lot of times I get annoyed by we need to insert something funny here. No, not always. And sometimes to me, the humor, like the classic, we're going to need a bigger boat line, that's right from the story, from the character. It's an honest reaction. And that line actually wasn't expected to get a laugh. It was sort of meant to be a darkly, slightly funny line. And when they screened the films and heard audiences really chuckle at that, it was a surprise to Spielberg and the producers.
Oh, interesting.
Wasn't that ad-libbed by Roy Scheider?
That's a good question. I don't think it was. I think Carl Gottlieb, the screenwriter, did write that, unless it was ad-libbed on the set. There was a lot of ad-libbing, though, going on, especially with Shaw and Dreyfuss. But that line perfectly encompasses the dark sense of humor. Everybody laughs, and at the same time, you're getting a chill down your spine, and that's the perfect combination. There's stuff like that in Halloween that Donald Pleasance says that gives you a chill but a little chuckle. I think not only the comedy works, especially when you have Hooper and Quint facing off in the third act, the long third act. It's like a whole other movie. But also just the lines with Mayor Vaughn, the stuff with Brody's on the beach and that Harry comes up. You're afraid of the water, aren't you, Chief? And he goes, "That's some bad hat, Harry." All these little interactions. Polly coming in and talking about the kids karate in the fence. There's so many good little bits, along with a lot of familial warmth. To me, one of the great warm moments that really makes you feel for Brody in particular, and you see the family ties, is where he's sitting at the table with his son and they're doing the steepling and looking at each other and making faces. And I've done stuff like that with my kids, especially when they were really young like that. And it hits you. It's really a great little moment among many of them. And that bit, one of my favorite funny but chilling bits is when Ellen Brody sees the National Geographic that Brody was looking at and sees that illustration of the shark smashing into the hull of the boat and says, "Get out of the water now, Michael." And you laugh, but at the same time you're thinking, yes, get out of there. That's terrifying. And interestingly, that painting is a rendition of a 1953 a shark attack episode that took place off of the coast of Nova Scotia.
Really?
Cape Breton,
Cape Breton, okay.
That's it. Yeah, which is right where they shot My Bloody Valentine, right in that Glace Bay area.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's really that image. I think one of the main images in the movie that sticks in people's heads, besides the shark breaching the water and all those other scenes, that painting really stuck in my head as a kid. And then I literally have a book, that has it in there. My favorite Great White Shark book by Richard Ellis. And it's chilling, and it gives you a sense of the history of this animal off our coasts, which is, hundreds of years of American history.
That's right.
Yeah, to answer your question, Tracy, there's no question this is from the horror genre, but it certainly does have episodes of adventure. I mean, it's not to the extent of Raiders of the Lost Ark or, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It's not to that level. But yeah, it's a combination of adventure, action, horror. But I think horror is definitely the prevailing genre, the prevailing theme that comes across here. I want to pick up on something, Kirk, you mentioned briefly, and you also mentioned this to me in an email you sent earlier in the week. You sent it actually both to Tracy and I. You believe that this movie offers a snapshot of America in the mid-1970s. Explain why you think that. Why is that the case?
So many elements, and I think just from the get-go, the opening scene, you have the campfire on the beach with the hippies, basically, the youth culture at the time. And of course, that was already fading a bit by 75. But as a kid, when I saw it in 78, I instantly recognized my parents, my aunts, my uncles. Those were the people. But Christy, who gets killed in the beginning in that iconic attack scene, she's an example of some of the grown-ups around that age group that I used to know and hang out with. So right off the bat, it kind of keys you into that. And then you have this island. Amity could be any small town, really, just like Haddonfield, Illinois, or Valentine's Bluffs. You have a small town dealing with an existential threat, and of course, the corruption of the local mayor wanting to cover things up or not tell the populace. All three films have that element. You need to not tell your deputies or warn the public Let's keep this covered up. And of course, people die because of it. And that's kind of like one of the dark sides of American history. A lot of times that happens, and people don't act till it's too late. And then you have just the American vacation culture aspect, them worried about the 4th of July coming up and all these influx of tourists. That's where Amity makes all of its money, aside from the wealthy people that live there and don't have to worry about that. The islanders, the town people, have to consider that, or they're going to be on welfare all winter, as Quint said. So that as soon as it kicks into the 4th of July part, it does, especially there, feels like a quintessential summer movie and American film, because I think we're one of the few cultures that really takes vacationing seriously. And we have this country that we can go and branch out into. And I would say that for all of North America, really, Canada included. But in race.
Well, we definitely feel that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here in Cooperstown, we're a tourist town.
Yeah.
And our summer season is short because our winters are so long, as we just, experienced the winter of 2024, 2025. Very cold. It persisted up until not that long ago. So summer season, it comes and goes quickly. And if you don't draw people, if you don't have good weather, you're not going to have that profitable summer that you really need to continue to exist, survive economically going into the winter months. So, Kirk, people have always had this fear of sharks, I think, even if the chance mathematically of a shark attack, a shark coming to their beach, attacking someone is quite small. Do you think it is that basic fear of sharks that make this such a powerful movie? Is that what drives this?
Yeah, I think I'm afraid of grizzly bears, and I'm afraid of crocodiles as well, which crocodiles take more people per year, at least 1,000 a year, from Nile crocodiles and saltwater crocodiles. So that's a bigger threat by far than a great white shark. But I think what makes it terrifying is, you're in the water, and as somebody who loves the ocean and loves swimming and everything, I still get that fear around murky water and what's below me. And particularly with great white sharks, they're one of those few sharks that they come from below, especially if you're in more than 15, 20 feet of water. They'll come from below, speed up, and then head straight up and nail you and breach the water. That's how quite a few attacks have occurred over the years, some really chilling ones. There's one guy. It's terrible. I remember as a kid seeing it on the news in 1981. A surfer in Monterey was out surfing and laying on his board, and was completely unaware there was a white shark stalking him from below. And it came up, breached, basically bit him in half along with the board. They found his body later with a huge crescent bite, and they found the surfboard with a crescent bite. It's Louis Boren was his name, and it's a really, really famous, absolutely terrifying attack, just showing you what they're capable of. And I think that existential fear of just murky water, the vastness of the ocean, and then the fact that there's something out there that could do that to you. I would feel that way if I was hiking up in Alaska around grizzlies, though. I'd be very, very, very wary and cautious, but at least you can see them coming, or you can take precautions. If you're out surfing and floating in the water, you're a morsel just floating on that surface. They even had a couple years back, a woman was attacked in Maine, which was the first attack, fatal white shark attack in Maine that ever happened. So you just never know. If you're in their region, it's a fear. But I think it's also unfounded in terms of the amount of times people are attacked by sharks, especially a white shark. There's far more things that'll take you out on this planet than that. But I think it just gets us in our gut.
Kirk, let's break down the three main characters here. We have Chief Brody, played by Roy Scheider, great actor. We have Hooper, played by Richard Dreyfuss, still alive. And then we have Quint, played by the great Robert Shaw, who died actually only 3 years after the film. He died very young. Let's start with Brody, very much a man of common sense and leadership throughout the film. He's really a hero, start to finish.
Oh, yeah. I love the background of his character, too. You're immediately aware from the time he wakes up with his wife about him coming from New York. and basically feeling helpless. Later he talks about how helpless he felt. The crime rate in New York will kill you. He's getting drunk on the boat with Hooper. And you really feel like he moving to Amity gave him a chance. As he said, in Amity, one man can make a difference. And there's a real stalwart sense of duty to Brody. And you could even see it when he struggles with Mayor Vaughn, trying to get him to cover things up. And, Martin, you're really going to close the beaches? Come on, And he's like, yeah, I'm going to close the damn beach. That's why I have these signs, and they ambush him on the ferry and convince him not to. And as you see his character evolve, especially once his son, Sean, I believe, is almost killed by the white shark in the pond. He's angry, and he's had it. And he wants to do what he originally wanted to do, is get Quint to kill the shark. And I like how he kind of bullies Vaughn. He's like, here, Larry, you're going to sign this and we're going to get this done. And Vaughn's at that point, he knows that he screwed up, and he knows the chief is right. And so you really feel, as a character, the entire movie, you feel that Brody is, ethically and morally sound.
Yeah. Now you have Hooper is also likable, but in a different way. He's very analytical, very scientific in his approach. He likes to explain things. Again, very different from Chief Brody's personality, but a guy that, brought some reason to this whole thing.
Yeah, I love Hooper's combination of extreme intelligence and being a wise ass. I do love that he's, immediately when he shows up and he's trying to help some of the local fishermen as chaos at the boat docks, and he's like, they're all going to die, that little high-pitched voice. I think it's Dreyfuss's greatest performance, and he makes him very likable, even if he is a wise ass character. And even in that dynamic with Quint, you feel for Hooper. He's trying to establish that I know what I'm talking about here. And you have so many great lines from him too. There's that bit where he does take Brody out to look for Ben Gardner's boat, and there's that line where it gets very serious. You're used to laughing at a lot of what Dreyfuss says, with the exception of the autopsy scene, which is chilling. When he suddenly stops and he says, "There's something else out there," and then the music rises and he's got the spotlight. You can really take him seriously, but he's also a great deal of fun. And I think as a kid, he's the youngest guy. And again, he's reminded me a lot of my parents' friends around that time, quasi-hippie a little bit. He's very identifiable. And I do like the fact that he knows what he's talking about. He gets a bit pedantic, but they need to hear his expertise. They need to know that. He tells Mayor Vaughn at that scene when they're in front of the billboard, look at that sign. He goes, those proportions are correct. And they have that little back and forth that's hilarious, and at the same time it's pushing the story forward. Yeah, he's great character.
Yeah, that's a great scene. Then you have Quint, one of the most memorable characters in horror history, played by Robert Shaw. In retrospect, Kirk, it's remarkable here. We have a British actor, a very fine British actor, and he's able to pull off this crusty old American seaman almost to perfection.
Oh, he's brilliant. I even have an action figure of him somewhere, 8-inch. I don't know where he went, but I love Quint. He's not somebody that, like, if I had to get on a boat with him and deal with him being captain, it might be a little tough, and I can see why Hooper chafed against him. I'd listen to what he had to say, but he is a bit of a gruff, tough guy, and his assessment of Hooper and grabbing his hands, you've been counting money all your life. It really shows you kind of the class consciousness that those two characters have. Hooper's a rich, very smart young man who loves sharks, and then you got Brody, who he doesn't know what he's doing on the ocean, but he's the authority. He's the sheriff. Yeah. And you can see Hooper and Quint know what they're doing out there, and Brody's trying to tie the knot and do the eel through the whole thing, and it not working out for him very well. And that dynamic is tremendous. And I think Shaw's performance has a lot to do with that. He's kind of lovable, crusty, and intimidating all at once. And as the film goes, you get a deeper sense, especially the Indianapolis speech, where he really unveils how he feels about sharks and why he wants to kill them all. He's tremendous, and I love that he improvised a lot of his dialogue. some of it drunk when they were shooting the Indianapolis scene, which just enhanced the verisimilitude of that sequence. And it's crazy how young he died. I think he died at 53.
Yeah.
Which just seems insane. He always seemed older to me anyway, and he still does. But just to come off of that major success, one of the big things Shaw was known as prior to Quint was the assassin in the James Bond film From Russia with Love. And he and Sean Connery got into that train car fight, and he's incredible there too. But Jaws really pushed him up to the next level, and it's sad that he didn't get to see that, the fruition of that. I think the other major film he did after Jaws was Force 10 from Navarone with Harrison Ford, that late 70s World War II movie.
Yeah. A film that he made just before Jaws, The Taking of Pelham 123. He's the leader of that group of robbers who take over the train in New York City. And he looks very different in that movie than he does in Jaws. Now, I think Pelham 123 was 1974. Jaws was 1975. And I'm sure part of the difference is makeup. But he was also a guy, he lived a hard life. He was a heavy drinker. He always looked older than he really was.
Yeah, I think the drinking probably aged him a bit. And at that point in his career, he was aged to perfection. Like he looked like he could handle almost anything. And Pelham 123, he's really a great character because there's a real logic to what he's doing. He's not some fast and loose nut, unlike a couple of the other characters in there that will just kill anybody in the train. I think that's a great movie. That's in my top 3 Robert Shaw movies easily. Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Kirk, one other actor to talk about in the film, Murray Hamilton plays Mayor Vaughn. He is quite good as the smarmy mayor. You know, he's the guy who makes, unreasonable statements like, we've got to keep this beach open. It's the 4th of July, for Christ's sake. I'm paraphrasing there. He's completely unreasonable. All he's interested in is the bottom line, making as much money for the town as he can so that he can get reelected.
Yeah, very much an American politician. All the negative, or politician in general, but especially an American politician. Yeah. It's all money and can I get it reelected and what do the constituents think? But only certain constituents. I think in some ways it's reasonable for him to want to save the summer season, but to put the populace at risk. And I think it's kind of, I guess, a microcosm or just a great example of how people, for the bottom line, especially politicians, will risk people dying just to make a political point or just literally for the bottom line money. It's kind of sickening, and it's still going on, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, he's an example of that. And yet he's really kind of likable and amusing in his own way. Murray Hamilton has often played characters like that. Like he was in a lot of Twilight Zones, Outer Limits, Alfred Hitchcock Presents back in the day. And he specialized in that type of character. And that's another aspect. It's the film that makes it like this American classic, this quintessential type of American film. Is he represents that, the smarmy politician, against the, sheriff who wants to do the right thing. And I really love their dynamic between those two.
Yeah. One thing that gets lost in the shuffle, Kirk, Jaws is based on a book that was written by Peter Benchley, came out a few years earlier. I have actually not read the book, believe it or not. Shame on me for that, although I've seen the film 40 plus times. Tell us about some of the major differences between what Benchley wrote in his book as opposed to what Steven Spielberg created on film.
There's 3 main ones, or maybe 4, but I think one of the big ones is tone. Benchley's book is really relatively serious. There's not the breezy humor that Carl Gottlieb and Spielberg introduced in the film. There's a sense to it, almost melodramatic soap opera kind of vibe. It was meant to be a beach read, so it was supposed to hit some of those things. Like obviously it's a man against nature story, but there's an affair between Hooper and Ellen Brody in the book that took me by surprise as a kid when I read it. I saw the film, and about 2 years later in 1980, I found the Jaws novel at a library sale and dived right into it. I was so excited, and I remember reading thinking, all right, this is a little weird, and especially the sexuality of it. That's kind of what taught me the birds and the bees was Jaws, and my mother explaining
Really?
things to me. Yeah, so
Yeah.
here I am reading this book, and I'm like, whoa, okay, so that that makes sense now. It's not the stork, and so that, but also threw me off too because as a 10-year-old, I didn't want to read about an extramarital affair. Now when I read it, it's okay now, but yeah, back then it was a bit of a surprise, and the book does the tension between Brody and Hooper on the boat later climaxes to them fighting over the situation because Brody knows.
Wow.
Eventually, he knows, and so it's a really weird subplot. But I think it did well in terms of hitting that demographic for beach reading and making it kind of an all-purpose novel at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of people wanted to dive into that melodrama. In the movie, it would have been a terrible idea to have that in the film. Another little subplot that's in the film is Mayor Vaughn is being leaned on by some mobsters from New York. And that's one reason he's so adamant about making sure nothing gets screwed up. He's having money problems, and in the book, it's Martin, I got these guys on my ass, and up to the point of somebody kills, I believe, Mayor Vaughn's cat and leaves it on their doorstep. So there's that melodrama aspect. But where the novel, two things in the novel that really work well still. The first opening chapter with Chrissy's death is amazing. Eventually captures the movie vibe perfectly, and it's its own little mini masterpiece. You could read that chapter, and that's all you need to read from the book. It's chilling. He goes from her point of view and the shark's point of view, and where they converge. Absolutely fantastic. And then at the end, the third act of the film is a bit shorter in the book, but once they get onto the ocean, there's a lot of interesting dynamics between Quint and Hooper and Brody that aren't in the film. And there's conversations like I remember one that was memorable. They talked about Hooper starts mentioning prehistoric sharks, and he mentions the Carcharodon megalodon, which is the giant, I think close to 40 to 50 feet prehistoric shark that existed millions of years ago. And he talks about like what if it still existed, and one of the quotes is, "It would be like a locomotive with a mouthful of butcher knives," and that stuck in my 10-year-old head quite vividly. And I really love little tidbits like that are in the book that aren't in the film. So it's a worthwhile read. You just kind of have to adjust your mind to the affair stuff and the mob stuff, and it being more of a potboiler on that level.
Very interesting differences. One question I have before Tracy jumps back in: what's your absolute favorite scene in the film? You've alluded to some of your favorite scenes, but if you could pin it down to one exchange, one sequence, what would it be?
Oh, that's really tough because I think the opening attack is unbelievably great. I'd probably have to chalk it up. I'd probably have to say the USS Indianapolis speech with the three men in the boat. The way that bonds them, it's all three of our main characters. It's utterly chilling and eerie, and the insight it gives into Quint's, psychology. I think that's my very favorite. But I'd have to say, like, second favorite would be Hooper and Brody out on the water at night looking for Ben Gardner's boat, because that scare, Hooper going down to inspect the hull, and the fear that you feel at that point. It is really terrifying, and then seeing the head pop out, and that was a big thing. I remember my mom talking about, this guy's head comes out and his eyeballs hanging, and what, really? I'd never had seen that in a mainstream film before to that level. So yeah, that one. There's so many good scenes in the movie, but those two stand out, and I really do think the pond attack is probably my third favorite, or fourth, because I feel so bad for that guy. He's going to help the boys out with their boat. And then, he said, it just seems like this nice guy being helpful and gets knocked out of his boat and killed horrifically. The screaming and the way you see the shark come up behind him and his leg falling. That whole scene is something else. But yeah, it's really hard to pick a favorite, but I would say the Indianapolis speech is it.
Very nice. Those are definitely memorable scenes. I'll give you that much. I'm just curious from your take, how has Jaws influenced modern horror and thriller filmmaking? And can you see any examples like in modern day where the influence has kind of like been brought into a different movie?
That's a really good question. I think, well, at the time, it certainly influenced a lot of rip-off films. Some of them, like The Last Shark from 1982 with James Franciscus, was a direct rip-off of the Jaws plot to the point that it got sued. I think in modern films, you know, it's tricky. I mean, there's plenty of shark films that are out there. Some good, some bad, some of them unbelievably ridiculous, like Sharknado. That I can't even watch them. I'd rather see something that takes it seriously. But in a way, I think some of the influence of like not showing the shark as much and being conservative on that, and when it does show up, it has an impact, has kind of been lost on modern filmmakers with all the CGI. You tend to see things too much. Movies that kind of do the old school Jaws thing. I'm trying to think of one that recently that did that, and I honestly can't. I watch most of the shark movies that come out.
Right.
Maybe the Reef was one where it kind of kept things close to the vest as far as showing the shark, and then when it did attack, they used real white shark footage, which was impressive in that film. But I think Jaws' influence beyond just animal attack and shark attack movies, with its characters and the pacing of it. I can't think of a film that's exactly done this, but just the way Marvel films even, I think in some ways you have something serious going on and world ending, but you also weave in some humor and weave in some family aspects and kind of make it a popcorn movie for everybody.
Right.
I think that one of Jaws' great legacies is that, but nothing's done it as well as Jaws. I think it's the all-time champ as far as placing all those things together. Even Jaws 2 kind of tries to recapture that, but it turns more into a slasher movie on the ocean with the teenagers being picked off, which I enjoy. I really like that movie to a large degree. But yeah, I think it's, besides just being the first blockbuster and influencing things, I don't think there's ever been a movie quite like it. People have tried to capture it. But I think it's really unique in its combination of elements and performances and characters and everything.
Oh, nice. Now, you had mentioned the pacing of this film. In your opinion, if Jaws were released today in the same pacing, the effects and the storytelling, how do you think audiences would react, especially, I guess, like the younger generation?
That's a really good question. I think on some level, the film just still works like gangbusters. With that opening attack, it sets its tone. But I do think modern audiences, or at least the kind of the short attention span audience of the younger people out there that are used to 30-second videos on TikTok, might get a little bored with the characterization. I would hope not, because I still see it as a perfect film. But yeah, I'm probably going to watch it again with my youngest coming up here. And just, he's seen it, I think, but it was a couple of years ago when he was like 8 years old. So I'm very curious to see what his reaction is going to be and where things lag for him. But I think in general, if you're going to go to the movies to see it and you're not distracted by devices and other things going on, I still think it's very engaging. And people will expect maybe the shark to be seen more, but I would hope they would recognize how effective it is to have it pop up like a jack in the box at the right moments. And if you show it too much, that breaching the water is Brody's chumming, and then his line about bigger boat. That's something that's so classic, and I still think it can work today for people who haven't seen it.
Right. Bruce, what do you think?
I think Kirk is right. I think some younger audiences might find it a little dull at times, even though they shouldn't, but that's just the way they've sort of been weaned on films. And, we're in a social media era where shorter videos, short posts, quips, comments relatively brief. The whole idea on Twitter is to, unfortunately, is to get a dig in at somebody, a one-liner or a two-liner. And I think that, that in a way that does transcend into movies, where longer movies sometimes struggle to get an audience, especially a younger audience, unless they have action from start to finish. But in my mind, it's still a great movie. And if I were making a film like that, I wouldn't change a thing today. I really wouldn't.
Awesome. So do you both agree that Jaws still holds its bite, or do you think it's mellowed with age?
Personally, I think it's a masterpiece. I love it so much. Maybe I've lost objectivity because I've lived with these characters, all my life, and it's inspired me to love the ocean. And when I was a 10-year-old kid, I was like a little shark expert, whatever I could devour on it. I was like a little hooper talking to adults about, it's got the spite radius and it's serrated teeth for eating seals. And, I knew about all the attacks, with all the records and things like that. For me, I think it still holds up fantastically. But I do see why there might be a younger generation who finds it a bit slow. I'd hope they wouldn't, but I love it, through and through, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. It doesn't even have anything about it that bothers me on a cultural level where you might go, oh, that doesn't fly today. That humor is a bit sexist or misogynistic or hateful or whatever. I think it's just wall-to-wall perfection. Maybe the greatest movie of all time, but I really have trouble naming a greatest movie when I have so many favorites, but it is up there.
Awesome.
The fact that it's 50 years ago and I can still remember going to the theater and I can still remember watching it on a big screen, I think it's all a testament. It's an absolute classic. So final question on Jaws, Kirk. If you had to rate it 1 to 5 stars, what do you give it?
Oh, that's an easy one. 5, straight across the board.
Yeah.
6. It's literally one of the perfect movies that I could throw it on anytime. It has so much to it. Like I said, it's a quintessential American film, and it touches on so many things and so many emotions. The main one being primal fear and the horror of the sea and what can eat you. But it just does so many things right. It's so quotable. It's beautifully shot. The music, we haven't talked about the music yet. It's one of the most memorable. It's so simple, that main theme, 2 or 3 notes, and anybody could play it. And then you have John Williams also doing these jubilant, fun, adventure themes, especially in the end when they're hunting the shark. But it's a classic through and through. 5 stars.
Nice.
Tracy, how about you?
I gave it 4.5. And I love this movie. And I rewatched it last night. Unfortunately, I watched it on the Crave app on my phone. So it was just a tiny screen. But I learned that my kid actually has watched this movie. And it was the subject matter of his film production class. So I guess he's actually seen a horror movie. My child has seen a horror movie. So that's 4.5 stars from me. And he actually really enjoyed it. His favorite character was Quint.
I think people that don't like horror films love Jaws. My mom, she's not a fan of horror at all, but I think she appreciated it back then and still thinks it's a terrific film. So I think it cuts across interests and cultures, and I think as a worldwide hit too, it did very well overseas. Anybody can identify with primal fear in the film.
Yeah. How about you, Bruce?
I'll go with 5 stars as well. 5 stars for me. It's a great story, memorable characters, both likable and not so likable, lots of conflict, lots of tension, some surprising moments the first time you watch it. It's an absolute classic. I believe Kirk used the word masterpiece, and I think that is appropriate. So 5 stars. So 5 stars from me, 5 stars from Kirk, 4.5 from Tracy, who's just a little bit on the stingy side here. We'll work on that, Tracy. So that's our assessment of Jaws 50 years ago. Yes. No. Hey, everybody has their own opinion. If we all said 5 stars, that would be dull. So, yeah. Yes, not on a phone, big screen. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a short time out. When we come back, we'll talk about another film from 1975. It came out 1 week after Jaws, Race with the Devil. We're back with a Ghostly Gallery podcast in a moment. We are back on the Ghostly Gallery. We've finished talking about Jaws and now on to Race with the Devil. So this film, also from 1975, tells the story of 2 really innocent couples taking a long camping trip throughout the American South. And then it becomes interrupted when the 2 husbands, played by Peter Fonda and Warren Oates, unwittingly watch a strange ritual in which a young woman is being stripped naked in front of them. Within a few moments, they realize that they're actually witnessing a murder that is part of a satanic ritual. And unfortunately for these 2 guys, the people that are doing the ritual notice them and see that they have been watched and that there are witnesses to what they're obviously doing illegally. So the husbands and their wives, played by Loretta Swit and Lara Parker, immediately become targeted as troublemaking witnesses who could cause problems for the Satanists with the law. So the 2 couples are pursued relentlessly by the cult members who seem to be everywhere. So in this film, we have a terrific cast that includes R.G. Armstrong, who plays a sheriff. We have Parker and Swit, who sadly just passed away. And then we have real-life best friends, Peter Fonda and Warren Oates, who reportedly had a great time working together on this film. So as we continue getting thoughts from Kirk Hazen, our resident historian, film expert, give us your thoughts first, Kirk, on the cast. 4 main players, and in your mind, all pretty darn good, right?
Oh, even more than that, Warren Oates is one of my favorite character actors of all time. Huge fan. And this is one of my favorite movies he's in. So many indelible, natural performances from him, especially on old, Twilight Zones and Outer Limits, old Hitchcock episodes of back in the day. And this is a couple of years before he died. Unfortunately, he's another one who died young. I think he died at 52, 51 in 1982. But yeah, he's a fantastic actor. And then the fact that, and Fonda is another one. I'm a huge Peter Fonda fan. They were best buddies, and they were looking for a movie to work on together. And that one popped up, and it kind of fit the bill for both of them. They love the idea. They love the idea of traveling in the RV and having a good time while they're making the movie, and that really translates. And Lara Parker, I love her in Dark Shadows, and it's really great to see her in this. She's kind of the key in the film in terms of her having premonitions and seeming uneasy. Loretta Swit, she's more just kind of having a good time, but Lara Parker is the one who really registers the fear and notices and feels something. It's really the only indication there's something supernatural in the film. Is, because basically it's a realistic, what if you were to run into this crazy cult type of setup? There's no Damien and no exorcism or anything like that. And Lara Parker, her eyes, I jokingly said to a friend when we watched it several years back that, they should have Kim Carnes should have done a song called "She's Got Lara Parker Eyes." they really register that fear that when she's in the pool and looking around at all those faces staring at her. It's unsettling. And the entire film, she delivers that level of performance. And Loretta Swit, it's a real surprise. I saw this movie when I was a kid on TV a few years after, like Jaws. And to see Margaret Houlihan in a horror film was pretty awesome. It was exciting. It was like, holy crap, and just seeing a different side to her, especially when the terror kicks in. But her just being this, kind of very nice, happy-go-lucky wife. And without having she's so indelible in MASH, and that's become part of how people view her. That was a real refreshing thing. And I remember, I think you did a post recently about her passing, and also fact that maybe she didn't have a good time or didn't get along with Lara Parker, but I listened to the commentary for Race with the Devil over the weekend, and from Parker's point of view, I guess they got along great. They really had a good time, and there wasn't any tension. Where Loretta Swit had issues was a rattlesnake scene that really, no pun intended, rattled her. She didn't want to be around them, and if somebody's afraid of snakes, I don't blame them. I'm fine around snakes myself, but she refused to step foot in the RV, so they did some cut-in shots, and they gave all of her lines to Lara Parker. So they, managed to work that out. But otherwise, apparently the whole cast had a great time in the film and very good memories about it.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kirk, because I was going to ask about this supposed tension between Parker and Swit. I've read this in several places. I've talked about it on Facebook, but there's never been any specifics. So you seem to think it's just a made-up story, that they did get along well.
That's possible, because in that Loretta Swit interview she did this spring that I had posted a link to on the page, she didn't mention anything about not getting along with Lara Parker. She had nothing but good things to say. And in Parker's commentary, she was very complimentary towards her. And I think sometimes people try to drum up, controversy, and maybe whoever that source was trying to do that, or maybe they saw something that nobody wants to admit to. I think with Fonda and Oates getting along so well, I would assume that would be infectious, because they all seem like they're married. They all have this everyday regular vibe to them, which really makes the tension even worse. And they're not they don't have like one couple bickering. Like nowadays, unfortunately nowadays, a lot of screenwriters would throw in, one couple's bickering, or there's like the Jaws novel, there's an affair between them, or something that would muddy the story up and overcomplicate things. No, they're just good people and dealing with some crazy people out there in the Texas heartland, which is an interesting thing because it's in Texas, so you'd assume most people would be Christians, but instead they're Satanists every square inch where they're going, and it's kind of cool the way they play that. Like, you figure you see a church somewhere, but you don't. It really rattles you, the paranoia. Every little small town and borough they go to, it just gets worse. That's the conspiracy of it.
Yes, a large network of Satanists at every turn. It's definitely pervasive throughout the film. One of the interesting things about Race with the Devil, the film faced some initial difficulties because they lost their original director and they had to turn to a plan B. So how did the filmmakers recover from this setback and end up making such a good movie?
Well, luckily I got the Warren Oates biography, and there's a little chapter on that, and I read it recently. Lee Frost was a friend of Warren Oates and Peter Fonda's, and he wrote the script for it. And so they naturally thought, well, let's let this guy direct it. Well, apparently the producers didn't really like the footage they were getting back, and they didn't like the fact that Lee Frost was letting everybody just improvise dialogue, which some of that is still in the film. But what happened was they decided to pull him off the film, and Fonda and Oates wouldn't have any of it. They were about to quit the movie. And then a producer came in and said, well, why don't we get Jack Starrett, who's somebody that Fonda and Oates knew well and liked. He'll come in, he'll pick up where Lee Frost left off. And I guess there was some tension in the first week, but they managed to smooth it over. And Jack Starrett turned in a terrific film. I think he did a great job with all the action scenes and the suspense scenes. And I guess Lee Frost really only had a small percentage of the film shot, and that was the beginning scenes where they're at the racetrack and at the motorcycle shop and all that. Otherwise, the rest of it's Jack Starrett. And Starrett even does a little cameo in the later half of the film. He's the gas station attendant guy who's running their credit card. And he's a great actor, by the way. He plays Galt, the vicious, abusive deputy in First Blood, the one that beats up Stallone and ends up getting killed, falls out of the chopper. He's one of my all-time favorite bad, corrupt cop type of characters. And so it's really interesting that he was a really, really solid director.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I did not know that at all. I'm curious, Kirk, would you classify Race with the Devil more as a survival horror film, a chase thriller, or a conspiracy film?
That's all three. I would say, maybe compared to movies nowadays, a survival-oriented horror film makes more sense if I had to narrow it down. It's a great hybrid because you have the fish out of water type of characters, just like Hills Have Eyes. You got the family in an RV in the middle of the Southwest somewhere, dealing with the locals. But I think it's more pervasive in Race with the Devil. The conspiracy aspect is really chilling. I don't, in my travels in my life, if you're in a small town and you do get a sense that everybody's watching you, or just, why are you in this bar? You get little vibes. When I was a kid, I'd travel with my dad out west, and I never really noticed anything outright. But thinking back on those memories of like going to a small Holiday Inn or a little hole-in-the-wall motel to stay the night in Oregon, and kind of getting strange looks from people, all the locals, that they're not used to people coming through. And there's a bit of that. And I think the chase aspect is so well done. Those stunts, that's another example of not having CGI. Those stunts are impactful and brutal and really entertaining. I think the second half of the film, you literally have 2 full chases separated by a little lull. And it's almost up to the level of the Road Warrior. They're so good and so intense, the shootouts and the crashes. And I love the bit where Warren Oates, you think, oh, after that first chase, they're in the clear. There's all those, the ambulance, and there's that bus, that little setup. And Warren Oates goes, I don't believe no school on Sundays, school bus on Sundays. And they take off, and I'm like, yes, good for you guys, because everything's been bullshit. And, you guys have been screwed over at every juncture. Just drive on through them, run them over if you have to. I love that bit. And yeah, then that kicks up again with another major action scene. I think it kind of hits all those marks. And it, like Jaws, it's a little cross-section of America, with ordinary, regular characters dealing with something that isn't supernaturally based. You either got a killer shark that's predating on people off Amity, or you have a bunch of evil Satanists who, aren't going to let anybody live or find out about their cult.
Right. Now, this movie, of course, it was released during, the height of the 1970s, like satanic panic phenomenon that was going on. There are several other movies kind of like around that same period that with the same subject matter. But do you see this film as cashing in on that trend, or did it make a legit commentary on paranoia and distrust?
I can't really think of any movie prior to it that had that plot. That's why I think The Hills Have Eyes, even though it's not Wes Craven never said it was an influence on The Hills Have Eyes, it really feels like it because that came out 2 years later, 2 or 3. And I think Race with the Devil is kind of a unique hybrid unto its own. And I think that's one reason why Fonda and Oates especially really recognize that in the script. They love the combination of being able to ride motorcycles and have car chases, but also have horror in a sort of Texas Chainsaw way. Like it's if you imagine, the group of teens and Chainsaw taking a road trip, and instead of stopping at the Sawyer farm, they just keep going and they're stalked by the family on the road. So if maybe that was an influence, perhaps, but I think it's kind of a unique thing unto itself. And it also factors in Peter Fonda, a lot of his movies, he loves downbeat endings where the characters don't survive or there's an ambiguity. And I think it ties in really well with that Easy Rider edict.
Right.
Of things getting bad, because the ending to Race with the Devil shook me when I saw it as a kid. I probably saw it around the age of 10 or 11. And I, being this kid raised in the Christian church and everything, and Satanism was everywhere in the 80s, it seemed. And I thought, wow, that's the way it is. Don't go to Texas. Because without spoiling the ending, it's really, really terrifying. And I guess the filmmakers didn't really know if they wanted to go with that ending. It was kind of a last minute decision to cobble together that footage and shoot that scene. And Lara Parker on the commentary said she had an idea for the ending, but she doesn't think it's any scarier that they end up parking underneath that beautiful sunset, and then and they're having fun drinking and everything, and then it fades out, and the next morning everybody wakes up and Lara Parker's gone, her character's gone, and just her pile of clothes are on the floor. And
oh wow,
that's a cool ending. I don't think it'd have the visual impact of what the movie does, because I think it shook me, and I think it shook audiences at the time.
Yeah, I know. I saw it for the first time just a few nights ago, and that kind of really, I was not expecting it. It's not often that I see a film where I watched the ending and I was kind of like blown out of the water. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's chilling because you're with these people, you're identifying with them. These are like, my parents going on vacation back then as a kid, and me being left behind, and that happening to them. That's the way it resonated. That's and again, without spoiling it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but just to see some of the characters materialize at the end there, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, oh shit, okay. it gives me goosebumps. It gives me goosebumps.
No, absolutely. So I've got another question for both of you. Just given the theme of this film, were you hoping for a little bit more background on the lore of the cult, or does the ambiguity just add to the fear with this film?
From my point of view, I think the ambiguity adds to it. There's touches of that, like when the wives go to the library and check out the book, seal it. It's funny. And then the whole note with the "so mote it be," which is a classic phrase used in witchcraft and Satanism. That's almost all you need, because you just, with that initial and incredible scene with Fonda and Oates witnessing it, because that scene, it starts off with them like, we have really made it, haven't we, pal? And things are great. We got our wives here. Life is great. And then they get the binocs and they think they're going to witness a hippie orgy. I love the look on Warren Oates' face. He grins. He's like, check this out. She took her clothes off, and just a couple of buddies drinking, seeing that, and then it turns. It really hits you in the gut when that knife comes down, and what danger they're in. And then the kind of the classic. It almost came off as an old sitcom thing where as Loretta Swit comes out and goes, "Hey guys," really loud, and they're like, "Shut up!" And that part is funny and scary. And at that moment, the clock is ticking. They're across that little river, but not far enough. And that sequence, with the exception of the ending, I think the chase scenes are thrilling, but I think the true scary scenes in that movie are that scene and the ending, because they're just trying to get away from these crazy, violent killers. The way they attack the RV and the way they're illuminated by the hellish brake lights, all those little touches. And it, the classic, oh shit, the tire's stuck, and we need to get out of there. It all played so beautifully. I think that scene is something else.
Oh, definitely. How about you, Bruce?
Yeah, Tracy, I think it works. The fact that we don't know that much about the cult. We don't know how big it is. We don't know exactly who's involved. When they first meet that sheriff, there's questions about him, and then you kind of understand that, there's something that extends into law enforcement here. I think it adds to the mystery, the intrigue, the feeling of paranoia that these four people have, and that therefore the viewer have throughout the movie. I'm curious, Kirk, what's the single biggest characteristic of this film that makes it effective for you?
Oh gosh, I think the paranoia of it, just from scene to scene, them when they go to the bar and the pedal steel player's looking at her, all creepy. The scene in the pool it's really settling. If you're swimming and you look around and all these people are looking at you, and you can tell. Yeah, I think it really does that well. And for me personally, as a kid, again, my background, is Satanism, and people that worship Satan were scary to me. So the idea that it's a non-supernatural thing, we never see any indication of them summoning spirits. In a movie nowadays, I think they might consider doing that, but it's just, you can watch that movie and not believe in Satanism at all, and you're basically being hunted by cultists. They could be any kind of cultist nowadays, whether even political. You could find yourself in a small town somewhere in America, and have the wrong color hair, or have the wrong T-shirt, and you never know. You could be followed out to the parking lot it's frightening just on that fundamental level of paranoia about conspiracies and cults. Because I find, you could go to LA and who knows, maybe Scientologists could hunt you. I know that they follow people and they do stuff like that, really creepy things like that. And so this is just a more primal fear level of Satanists doing this. So that's what definitely resonates with me. And it's just a great chase thriller too. Once it kicks in, the whole movie has that unease all the way through to the very end.
No, definitely agree. My final question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Kirk. Do you feel this film is underrated or rightfully obscure? And do you think more people should be talking about it today?
Yeah, I really think it's a classic of its time, and I think it's to me, it's endured. I've showed it to my kids, I've showed it to friends who haven't seen it, recommended it to people, and I think it holds up and it should be seen. I think it's underappreciated. When you, like a lot more people know about The Hills Have Eyes, and I do love that movie and appreciate a lot of it, but I think Race with the Devil's better. I think it functions better. The Hills Have Eyes goes in a direction and takes chances with some really vicious stuff like the rape and the kidnapping of the baby and all these things that are more intense than Race with the Devil. But I think overall Race with the Devil works better for me. I think it is vastly underrated, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, I would agree, Tracy. I think it's a perfect film to watch if you still go to a drive-in theater. There aren't many drive-ins left. We actually have one in central New York that's not too far from our home headquarters here in Cooperstown. So if you can watch this in a drive-in, it's a perfect setting, but it's also a great Saturday night film to watch on TV too. So to me, it holds up. It is underrated, as Kirk says, and it is a film that more people should talk about. You referenced earlier, Kirk, the ending to this film, and it's one of the best in horror history.
Yes.
I think of 1970s films, the three that come to mind as far as the great endings, stunning endings, this one, The Wicker Man, and Burnt Offerings.
Oh,
what do you think?
Yeah. I think I agree 100%. All three are thunderclap endings that really hit you in your gut. The Wicker Man, it doesn't, like Race with the Devil has a lot more horror in it as it builds up to its ending, but The Wicker Man is stunningly chilling at the end. And I remember watching that when I was probably a little too young, actually. It was on TV, and it being another one of those existential, like you're a Christian kid and you're seeing that and you're like, oh my God, the Satanists win. The Wiccans or the cultists on that island win. And Burnt Offerings, yeah, oh geez, Karen Black's at the end, Karen Black's face, and the way everything falls apart, everything seems like it's going okay, just like the end of Race with the Devil. Oh, we've gotten past this and things are going to be good now, and then it hits you, and the demise of the kid, and I don't want to give away, but Burnt Offerings, that shook me too. It was like, oh my God, they did that. So I think it's way up there, if not my very favorite. And there's a lot of 70s downbeat endings in that era. Certainly the Count Yorga films, the Death Master, even Let's Scare Jessica to Death has a really great, atmospherically beautiful downbeat ending. And it fits in perfectly with all that. I think where Race with the Devil especially excels is we've identified with those characters really closely, and they're ordinary people, and they're just trying to get the hell out of there. And it's not like they want to go ahead and crush this satanic cabal and go to the authorities. It's at that point they just want to get, and maybe they'll report it, or maybe they just want to go ahead and forget it all happened, and then to have what happens happen. It's rough and it's intense.
Yeah, very good. Final question, Kirk. What's your rating of Race with the Devil? 1 to 5 stars. What do you give it?
Yeah, I'd have to say I would give it at least 4, if not 4.5. And I can't even think of why I don't go to 5 stars, because I love this movie. But yeah, you know what? I'm going to say 4.5 because it's so underrated.
4.5?
And
Okay.
And I love the cast. I love the tension in it. It's got more than a couple of standout scenes, and it flows really well. I think just the way it builds as it gets to the end, and then that little breather. I think it's pretty brilliantly done. I'm sure if Spielberg or Carpenter had done it, maybe the directing would be a bit more skillful, but I think Jack Starrett did a great job, and that the script works and the premise works. And yeah, to me, any movie, especially horror films, the ending matters most, and they nailed that.
You got to finish strong.
Yeah.
You have to have a good finish to these films. What do you think, Tracy?
Um, I only saw it for the very first time a couple nights ago. And unfortunately, again, I watched it on my little cell phone just because I couldn't get it on a different app. But I gave it a 3.5 for my first time. The ending was my absolute. It was the chef's kiss. It was beautiful. I loved it. Scary, creepy. And I was so fascinated to see Loretta Swit in a role that was not Hot Lips Houlihan, right? Because I've never seen her in anything else before. That's the only place I know her from. So, yeah, I gave it a 3.5. But, ask me again when I see it again. That probably will change. But for my first time, I gave that a 3.5.
3.5. Yeah, when I first watched this film, I kept waiting for Frank Burns to come out of the shadows, but
yes. Wasn't one of their husbands named Frank too? I think one of the husbands.
I believe so. Yeah.
Or else, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Loretta Swit was his wife, so yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if they did that on purpose. That's interesting.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It'd be hell of a twist if
Tracy,
Frank Burns showed up at the end,
Right.
Yeah.
One of the cult members.
Well, Tracy, I'm with you. I give it 3.5 as well. I think it's an excellent film. It is one we've talked about how underrated it is. It's a very effective story. It wasn't made on a big budget, but it looks more expensive than it was. And considering they had to make a change in directors, after the project started, it came out spectacularly well. In many ways, it's a simple film, but it's also a film that constantly has you on edge, constantly has you paranoid, and it pulls the rug out from underneath you. There's no way I saw that coming. I don't know if anybody really saw it coming the first time around. So it's a terrific film, and hopefully it's one that will get more appreciation, even though it's 50 years after the fact. So 3.5 stars from me, 3.5 stars from Tracy, 4.5 stars from Kirk for Race with the Devil. Our guest has been Kirk Hazen, outstanding horror historian and budding director himself. Kirk, as always, we thank you. We've been putting a lot of pressure on you in recent weeks, giving you a big workload, and you've delivered nicely. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, guys. I really enjoy this. It's been a pleasure, and it's really fun because I already know a lot about these films, but I can discover more about them, and rewatching them really helps reassess them. And of course, in this case, two from 1975, they're both brilliant films. And just lately, I mentioned watching zombie movies with my kid. Reassessing Day of the Dead and stuff like that, and I'm kind of re-immersing myself in these films that I know so well. But you can always find something else about them to love, and maybe add the star rating. Like Race with the Devil, I might have given it 4 stars, but I have to go to that 0.5 star now because this latest viewing is just wonderful.
Always a sign of a good movie or a great movie is when you watch it, even for the umpteenth time, you see something different, you notice something you had not seen before. So we thank Kirk. We thank, of course, Tracy Asteria, the co-host and executive producer of our program. We thank all of you for listening and joining us in this Museum of the Macabre. And we do hope that you'll join us again next time, right here in the Ghostly Gallery.